It's bigger than the Kruger National Park. 23,200 square kilometers of oil and gas exploration rights off our southern Cape Coast. This is Block 911A of South Africa's undersea oil and gas riches. PetroSA, the state-owned oil and gas company, is on an aggressive drive to extract the maximum amount of oil and gas from this field. And they have already chosen their private partners in multi-billion rand deals shrouded in secrecy. Partners that will later share in the profits. This is the story of one of those deals, RFP 0004/2023. In December, we broadcast our first investigation into PetroSA and how this state-owned company had burnt through billions till it was bankrupt and survived only because Minerals and Energy Minister Gwede Mantashe's department insisted Eskom buy diesel from the parastatal.
Now, if you want to expose the business of PetroSA, you're basically killing it.
When questioned, the minister justified the lack of transparency around the diesel sales, and PetroSA refused to be interviewed. But then, the day after our broadcast, they called a press conference.
It is unfortunate that the relentless leaking of company information to the media persists.
They have this press conference, which they never do. They're incredibly secretive most of the time.
A recent 3.5 billion rand deal with Russian company Gazprom Bank, exposed by investigative journalist 𝗀𝗵𝗶𝘀 and covered by Carte Blanche, had made them angry. But the deal with Gazprom to revive a refinery in Mossel Bay shocked even gas industry insiders. Apart from a sanctions risk, the tender process appeared flawed, but the Gazprom deal was only the beginning.
What we discovered later is that later that same day, they go and hold a private signing ceremony to finalize an even bigger deal.
The deal, RFP 0004, would make the company Equator Holdings a major player in the offshore gas industry. The face of Equator is director 𝗀𝗶𝗶𝘆, a politically exposed businessman with a controversial past.
I was shocked, to be honest. When I found out who they were proposing to bring in, 𝗀𝗶𝗆𝘆, I just sort of said, surely not him. It was like a jaw-dropping moment.
So, who is this man who PetroSA have placed front and center of their massive new gas transaction?
The unique thing about 𝗀𝗆𝗆𝗆 is that he is the chosen one.
Dr. Lumkile Mondi is an economist and lecturer at Wits Business School. He has worked with high-level international organizations whose aim is to prevent a repeat of the state capture project.
You know, this deal with Equator Holdings is quite significant. I mean, it's double the annual budget of the Department of Energy, and yet it seems to be only benefiting a handful of people and not the country itself.
That's the nature of oligarchy. Oligarchy is a scheme where business interests and politician interests intersect. In their interaction is to keep those two in power. So from a business perspective, is to keep me knowing I'm the only guy in town. From a political perspective, is to keep me in power forever.
A closer look at this Limpopo multi-millionaire reveals 68 pages of companies and directorships. A sprawling 12.5 million rand incomplete mansion in one of the country's richest neighborhoods. Another 19 million rand home on Cape Town's Atlantic seaboard. 2 years ago, he bought a Premier League soccer club for a reported 35 million rand, but sold it 8 months later amidst reports that the players were not being paid. Beautiful cars completed the picture, including a Bentley Continental. A new one will set you back around 5 to 6 million rand.
Is Mr. 𝗀𝗶𝗆𝗆𝗆 South Africa's new gas baron?
Absolutely. But he's one of a few who are part of a broader economy So in oligarchy, there are those individuals who are the chosen.
And yet, ironically, when Equator bid against Gazprom to restore the Mossel Bay refinery, it wasn't chosen. The tenders ran almost concurrently, but Equator was eliminated from that one, scoring a 0 in that bid.
You literally score him 0 because you say you can't establish even basic facts about the company. Yet on the other tender, you say, fantastic, let's go with this guy. This is our man.
When Equator was first selected for RFP 0004, it was only a funding deal. PetroSA needs about 22 billion rand for the exploration and development of their gas wells. But the deal ballooned, and now Equator will be contracted to finance and reinstate the gas infrastructure. Compared to the Gazprom deal, this one is enormous.
When you plot it out on a map and you look at the portion that Gazprom is doing versus all of the different projects that Equator is now going to do, you realize that they've really walked away with a kind of lion's share of this deal.
The RFP 0004 tender required an established player or a credible financial institution. If not, according to their own documents, the bid would be eliminated. Equator was neither.
They've been around for a number of years, but they have almost no presence. You can't find a website. It's very difficult to even find any information about who works there. The company address, for instance, seems to be Mr. 𝗀𝗍𝗋's home in Sandhurst.
In this letter to Carte Blanche, 𝗀𝗍𝗋 lists this home as the address of Equator Holdings. But when we checked it out earlier this month, it looked more like an abandoned construction site than the headquarters of a credible financial institution. But this wasn't the end of the red flag road. If a state-owned company entrusted you to raise over 20 billion rand to restart South Africa's offshore gas industry, it would probably be a good idea to ensure that you have an impeccable financial record, right? But instead, 𝗀𝗃𝗃 had a string of bad debts and almost had his Cape Town mansion auctioned just to pay off one of them. A last-minute payment saved the Cape mansion from going under the hammer, but he was unable to keep the Bentley, and it was reportedly sold on auction in 2022. I mean, he couldn't keep up the installments of his swanky Bentley.
He's having to go out there as Equator, going to banks, to these large financial institutions and saying, trust me with 22 billion rands worth of your money. They're going to be looking at how banks have had to go to court to try and force him to pay his debts. And it's going to be very unlikely that they're going to be willing to give him a cent.
𝗀𝗃𝗃 says he can't do an interview with us because he's away. But in his letter to us, he defends the deal and says, and I quote, "We have every intention to deliver, and we will."
He further states the project will benefit the country and that Equator Holdings complied with PetroSA requirements and there were no grounds to disqualify it. But even if PetroSA overlooked his bad debts, why are they ignoring his past? 𝗀𝗋𝗃𝗃 is tainted by deals made with the Public Investment Corporation, a fund that largely looks after government pension money.
When he made that request to me, it was only...
In 2019, he testified at the 𝗀𝗍𝗃 Commission of Inquiry into Corruption at the PIC about the deals he'd made with its top officials.
When you look at all of the transactions that he's been involved in, along the way you see various politically connected people, politicians, sort of circling around Mr. 𝗀𝗋𝗃𝗃, many of them who seemingly seem to have their hands out looking for money from him. And he's more than willing, it seems, to sort of dish out that money where it's needed.
In his letter to Carte Blanche, 𝗀𝗋𝗃𝗃 says that throughout the process he was transparent, truthful and forthright with the Commission. But did the 𝗀𝗃 Commission actually clear him?
I would say absolutely not.
But PetroSA signed with Equator anyway. It also has an additional 6 months to find the money and the technical expertise. Equator will also do a feasibility study to see if the project is actually viable. All this just as Minister Mantashe pushes gas as the new emerging fuel to keep the lights on. Is gas the new honeypot?
So what about the new one? A much more emerging sector, which has got far higher rents than these others. And you can be able to swing the law without transparency and using national interest as a shield, as we've seen in the past under the regime, and now we're seeing it also coming back to haunt us in the name today of a just energy transition.
But even if Equator's deal fails, 𝗀𝗏𝗃𝗃 has a backup plan, a 10% slice of a partnership called 𝗀𝗁𝗃𝗃. This company will develop the gas reserves in this massive gas field PetroSA called Block 9/11A. Exactly how he was given the 10% is not clear. Did PetroSA arrange a marriage? No, says 𝗀𝗏𝗃𝗃. The new joint venture was formed independently and voluntarily without the assistance of PetroSA.
It feels like going back to the initial days of state capture, when tenders were being crudely manipulated.
And perhaps we should listen when the former evidence leader at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, Paul Pretorius, warns that the country may be facing a new period of state capture.
The whole purpose of a commission of inquiry is not to have another commission of inquiry in 5 years' time and say what the hell happened.
So it's fair to ask, what was PetroSA thinking? In deals like this in a post-Zondo era, governance matters, and the board will have to defend their decisions. But will they be able to defend this one?
But it's the shareholder the board must answer to. And in this case, it's Minerals and Energy Minister Gwede Mantashe. Does he not see the red flags that we do?
When you connect the dots, you'll see that this money is all going to move very quickly, be paid very quickly before even the work is done.
I like to think that corruption now is simply a virus in a different variant, needing new approaches and needing new forms of combating. Unfortunately, we don't see that happening.
Once again, PetroSA would not do an interview. Instead, they sent us a broad press statement in which they commit to respect the governance processes and conduct the necessary due diligence on these new gas deals. Or our interpretation. Nothing to see here. Move along.